Recording in progress.
All right, welcome everybody to our Provo Municipal Council meeting. It is Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. It is 5:33 p.m. Meetings of the Municipal Council are being held in hybrid fashion. Members of the public can continue to view council meetings on YouTube or Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chamber here at the Provo City Center. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. My name is George Handley. I'm the council chair. I'm joined on the stand here by councilors Ellsworth, Whipple, Hoban, Fillmore, and Shipley, and Councilor McKay may be joining us. I don't see her online yet. May be joining us later online. And also by Wayne Parker, Chief Administrative Officer, Justin Harrison, our Executive Director, and Brian Jones, our City Attorney. Opening prayer will be offered by Brad Bundy, after which we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, please.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the blessings we enjoy and to be a part of a community. And please help us as we deliberate, that we can be inspired and that we can help build a community where all feel welcome and where we can build and uplift our children and families and people who live here. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilor Fillmore. All right. Before I mention public, we'll have a public comment period for any item that is not on the agenda tonight. I just want to point out that tonight's agenda does have two continued items. Number one, which will be continued to a later meeting, and number three, which is regarding zone map classification amendment at 1220 East 960 South. That item we will take public comment on tonight, but because the Planning Commission report never got to us on time, we are obligated by statute to continue the item for the next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks, at which point we will begin deliberation. So we won't have a report on the item. We're just going to offer any time for people to make public comment, and then in 2 weeks' time we'll revisit the item. All right, as indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment is still taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to a total of 10 minutes. At this time, up to 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature to indicate they wish to comment. The chair I may alternate between in-person and online commenters. Please state your name and city of residence as you begin, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. We also ask, I guess we're not doing the, Catrice McKay is online. We're not doing the handwritten name, or are we? No? Okay. All right. All right. So for any item not on the agenda tonight, is there anyone who would like to make a public comment? All right, seeing no public comment, I don't see anyone from online, so we'll begin with item number 2. Since item number 1 has been continued, a resolution consenting to the appointment of individuals to various boards and commissions. Mayor Kafusi, who has joined us, thank you for, I didn't introduce you earlier. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Council Chair Hanley. Members of the Municipal Council, I'm recommending the following appointments to Provo City boards and commissions as indicated and submit them herewith for the council's advice and consent. These 2 tonight are for the Board of Adjustment. The first one is Maria Winden. I am recommending Maria be reappointed to a 3-year term on the Board of Adjustments ending June 30th, 2025. And do you want to vote on them together? They're both
Sure.
on the Board of
Yeah.
Adjustments. And the second one is Lorraine Urquiaga. Lorraine has served on the Planning Commission and the Transportation and Mobility Advisory Committee in the past and will be a great asset. I am recommending Lorraine be appointed to fill an unexpired term left by Wes Marriott ending June 30th, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there any discussion of these proposed names? Seeing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. I'll begin with Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor, George Handley will vote yes. Councillor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore,
Yes.
Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Shipley,
Yes.
Councillor McKay.
Yes.
All right, we'll turn to item number 3, which is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.22 acres of property located at 1220 East, 960 South from one family residential R18 and residential conservation RC to low density residential LDR. And as I said, instead of having a staff member present on this item, we'll just open this item up for any public comment for 2 minutes a person. Or online or in person. So anyone who'd like to comment on this, please come forward.
Okay, my name is Christy Charles. Do you need anything other information?
And
My
you're from
address?
Provo. Yeah.
I'm from Provo, 928 South, 1230 East, close to this, right across the street from this lot. So, okay, I'm the neighborhood co-chair for the neighborhood directly across the street from the lot in question. I've also lived in Provo most of my life, and my neighbors and I are deeply committed to our area of the city. I sent you all a detailed email earlier today that I'd like to direct your attention to for the details of my comments, but here I can only give the highlights. First, even though this seems like a small issue that only affects one lot, R18 single-family zoned lots are extremely rare in our area and are precious to us because they represent long-term owners who live in their properties and contribute to our neighborhoods. We ask you to stick to the Southeast area plan of protecting R18 zoning as much as possible. If you're willing to compromise on that standard with this lot, you show a myopic disrespect for the careful planning that went into those plans. Second, the developer has said his plan is to make this a long-term rental property and has let the lot become a fire hazard and eyesore. I brought pictures, they're also in the email. He clearly does not care about the long-term future of our neighborhood. Third, I believe the Planning Commission meeting with only 6 commissioners present unfairly advantaged the developer and his city staffer advocate who pushed the commissioners to re-vote, even though they had already decided they needed more time to study the issue. The commissioners changed their votes due to pressure as well as exaggerations and false reasoning that I addressed in my email. Here are a few of the main points from that. Single-family homes in our area are highly sought after and sell fast. This twin home will be twice the size and twice the density of any home or lot in the area, including a higher density than the entire apartment complex to the west. As such, 2 3,000 square foot twin homes will not be much more affordable, because affordable housing was mentioned, than 1 2 to 3 square foot 1,000 square foot single family home and should not be considered affordable housing. The twin home will also stick out, and there's a major safety issue at this location. I have one more paragraph, but should I stop? It's at the time.
Yeah, you can finish your
Finish my
paragraph.
paragraph? Okay. So there are no other transition buildings between apartments and homes in this area. But most importantly, by approving this twin home, you will be favoring an out-of-town developer who is trying to make the highest profit over a carefully created neighborhood plan and neighbors who have demonstrated their commitment to our area of Provo. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nick Blackburn. I reside in the same area as Christy, and I'm here to oppose the amendment as well. I come with kind of a unique background. I am a 18-year firefighter here in Provo City. What I have noticed through my career are a few things. One, we're losing guys that don't live in the city as well as work here in Provo. I'm one of the very few handful that is like that. And I love working where I live, and I love to serve the community of Provo, and it has a higher place for me because I live here. One of the huge problems I see with making this a twin home is parking. If you drive down 960 South right now off of State Street heading towards our neighborhood, the street on both sides is, excuse me, just lined with cars. I believe if this twin home were built right across the street from our cul-de-sac, the parking would begin to invade our cul-de-sac. I have already seen it at times. There are times that I have driven through my cul-de-sac, seeing the congestion, thinking there is no way that a fire truck would make it in this cul-de-sac if there were an emergency. That is a deep concern to me. Over the years, through my several years as a firefighter here, I have seen the congestion getting worse and worse here in Provo City. It makes it a lot harder for us to get to our emergencies. And we pride ourselves on a 4-minute response time here in Provo City. It's probably one of the best in the nation. We'd like to keep that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, council members. Thank you for your service and your time. My name is Brad Bundy. I've lived here 13 years and am with my wife, of course, the homeowner at 925 South, 1230 East, which is the cul-de-sac right stone throw away from where this proposal is being made. I also sent you a detailed email with numbers and calculations that I've tried to prepare for you. We pride ourselves in community, and community. I love the city. I moved back here for my undergraduate to serve and to be an educator. And we want a safe place for our children. And it's hard sometimes to find a safe place for your children. And so we moved into a cul-de-sac, an R1 area, which we were very excited about and saw it grow. The lot next to us over those 13 years was just barely developed. So it's been vacant. It hasn't been a built-in lot for these past 13 years, and just barely a family moved in. They had struggled for a long time to find housing, and have talked many times how grateful they were able to find a place for their family to come and move into Provo as an engineer. And we value that. And here we have a developer from a company located in Pleasant Grove coming in and just recently this year purchased this land. The listed price increased from when it was sold in August 2020 from 130,000, and then the listed price less than 2 years later was 225,000. I don't know what it was sold for, but those listed price changed. Some land was purchased, about 390 square feet from high density housing to increase the size of the front so they could somehow fit 2 driveways on that land, which is concerning as well, because we already have a parking problem. We lost land that could be used for parking in that high density zone. And if we built this here, we're subdividing a land that is 9,500 square feet. Across the street from this land is a property owner who has one home on that land, and they have over 15 100 square feet. 15,000 square feet. So 50% larger than this land. I mean, where do we stop the creep? They seem to have more right to have renters and to have multiple units on their land than this small plot. The plot directly neighboring to the west is the same way. And we're just deeply concerned about creep. Why do we let an out of town developer come in and make a massive profit by subdividing a very small plot of land and yet punish the homeowners who are trying to build a community? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Pearson. I live in the house he was talking about they built last year. About a stone's throw away, like you said, from this lot in question. So I just wanted to give a data point and an opinion. So the data is that they listed our house that they built last year in this same neighborhood. They listed it for 609 and we offered 630 for it. It's kind of what you had to do. Is the third house we've made an offer on, and we always offering above the listing price, obviously. So this house next door to the apartment complex would have probably a different. Things would be a little bit different from the house that I bought, but my understanding that some of the numbers they were thrown around in the last meeting were like 800,000 or $1 million for a single family home that would be built there, and that's inaccurate. Since the one that I bought last year was for in the 600 range, and I can't imagine that the one they would build by the apartments would cost more than that, since things have kind of cooled off a little bit. And also, since we bought the house, we've had several people tell us, "Oh, we saw they were building a house there, and we were hoping we were going to be able to buy it, but they either didn't put an offer in or missed out or whatever. The people who sold us the house didn't really give us the details on other offers." But anyway, my opinion is that a house that would be built there, on one side you have the apartments, but on the other side of the house is another very beautiful single family home. And I really think that it would be pretty easy to sell a single family home in that area, even if it's right by these apartments. And anyway, that's my bit. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Gesselson. I live in the Cinnamon Ridge neighborhood, which I believe this lot is a part of our neighborhood. Presently it is zoned R1, and I represent our HOA, our entire neighborhood. I've been asked to come and just reiterate what you've already heard, that we oppose this amendment. Primarily, many of our residents have suggested that they've read the Southeast Plan, the Provo City Southeast Plan, which did not provide for conversion of R1, anything that is within an R1 neighborhood, to be converted to a multi-resident housing. So that is the first item that our neighborhood has asked me to present. We wish to see it remain R1 zone as it is. And second, you've heard about parking, and we can already see the spillover from the apartment complex that is located on 920 South, right next door to this lot. It's already spilling over into the neighborhood in the cul-de-sac that you've heard from just from these residents just now. It's also spilling over into the Cinnamon Ridge neighborhood. So we know that there's just not going to be enough room for parking in this lot once it's constructed. If it's a single housing, an R1 house, then we expect there will be at least a probability that there will be less cars on the street. And then finally, as far as parking is concerned, we have a primary concern in our neighborhood, and that is with safety with children. There's a lot of young children in the cul-de-sac across the street and in the Cinnamon Ridge neighborhood. And cars on the street pose a huge danger for the kids, these little kids that are darting out into the street. We're doing everything we can to help our neighbors get their cars off the street and make it as safe as possible. And we believe that maintaining R1 with this lot would help us in that endeavor for greater safety for the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment from the public? All right, thank you. Go ahead.
My name's Trevor Sharp. I'm the big bad developer who's outside of Provo. which I think is pretty interesting. I'm not sure how that is a requirement to build here in Provo. Last thing I understand, there's plenty of developers who come outside of Provo and develop here. So I don't think that's an issue or going to be any kind of problem for someone to come and build a home. Second, someone made a comment about why we're coming here to make more profit and that we're going to make this a long-term rental. No, that's not what I said. What I said, the main purpose of why I bought this lot was so that my son and his new wife could actually come into a house so they could rent one side and help pay off their mortgage. So it's supposed to be a rental for my son and his wife to be able to have some rental potential down the road so they can pay down the mortgage. So I'm not sure what they're talking about, long-term developer, someone here locally that's going to do it. But people come in and out of states from different states or different counties or different cities within Utah County to develop. So I'm not sure how that's a deterrent. Second of all, there's been a lot of talk about safety and parking. There's currently an issue with safety and parking on that street. And I would say that because it's a vacant lot, people feel more emboldened to be able to park their vehicles there because no one's going to say anything. If we're actually going to be developing there, which we hope we do, then we're going to be able to provide a little bit better safety from that. We are not proposing to park any vehicles along the street, as it's been pointed out here. We have our site plan designed. It meets all city code, all city requirements for us to be able to park within our driveway and within our 2-car garages. So again, I don't see how that proposes an issue for us to be able to build there. We've met all city code. The staff approves it, planning commission approves it, and we got a handful of people who aren't happy with it. And also long-term, your future plan actually calls that lot to be an LDR zone lot, not an R1 zone lot. So we feel like it fits seamlessly within your future development plan. Again, this lot is not part of the Cinnamon Ridge plat. It's actually excluded from the plat. So whatever the HOA member said has no applicability at all to that lot.
Thank you.
My name is Randolyn Macedoni. I'm just recovering my voice, so I appreciate the microphone. I am a resident of Provo. We have lived here for 25 years as students, as employees, as parents, in all forms. And we really feel like the area where we live is a gem. There are numerous realtors that would tell you that getting a listing in any of the Cottonwood Meadows, Cinnamon Ridge area is pay dirt because the houses sell fast, because it is a very sought after area. It's one of the few places in Provo where you can have a new home for great square footage without having to tear down an older home and kind of uproot an entire older neighborhood. We were the first house that was built on this cul-de-sac, and our kids enjoyed free reign of weeds galore until other houses came in. And I honestly would prefer developed land to a vacant lot. But I do not feel that that warrants changing the zoning. There are numerous homes, probably within 5 or 6 houses, where there is the opportunity for a separate entrance basement rental for the R1 requirement to have a owner-occupied rental situation. So I do not feel that changing the zoning is absolutely necessary to help all these situations come together in a way that would benefit both the neighborhood and the developer. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angela Blackburn. I'm married to the firefighter who spoke earlier. We have been here for 12 and a half years. We live in the same area. I just want to say that I love living in Provo. One of the biggest reasons is because Provo is a big picture city. There's a big plan they think about the future and they make plans for that future. And that being said, someone in the past made a plan for our neighborhood. And in that neighborhood plan, in section 3, block A, it specifically states that no properties that are currently zoned as R1 are recommended for changes. So I ask as a city council that you take into consideration those in the past who've made plans for the future and use their recommendation to not change any zoned R1 areas. And I'm going to leave it at that, but thank you so much for listening to everybody and taking into consideration our thoughts and feelings about how much we love our home and our neighborhood and want to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further comment, we thank you for coming and for sharing your thoughts. Again, we will not have the debate and discussion tonight. We're just going to move on to the next item, and this item will be brought back to us in 2 weeks' time. We'll have more time to be able to review the Planning Commission report, which we didn't get in time, and we'll certainly be weighing the important points that have been made by all of you today. We appreciate it. And you're of course welcome to come back in 2 weeks when we'll begin that process again. So thank you. All right. So we'll continue then on to item number 4, which is a resolution appropriating $245,000 in the general fund to cover costs incurred during golf course construction and a transfer of those monies from the general fund to the golf course fund. And John Borgett, and it looks like actually Scott Henderson is going to make our presentation.
You may hear from all of us.
Okay.
In fact, I'm pretty certain you'll hear.
We're always
from all
happy to
of
hear
us.
from any of you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Municipal Council. And we covered this at an earlier work session. You will be hearing quick comments from myself, Brett Watson, Golf Course Professional Manager, and John Borgett, Administrative Services Director, to provide a little bit of a time frame to this perspective. And if we can go to that first slide. So during this time frame that we're talking about, construction, which was involved in mitigating the impacts of a development on golf course land, we also had a pandemic that compounded the issues and what we were dealing with in this time. So a lot of other departments went through complete shutdowns, and that was not uncommon during this time frame. And those cities experienced revenue loss wherein the expenses still exist. We promoted in Provo safe use and keeping healthy activities going. In our reality, we self-balanced revenues and expenses at facilities, which made us very, very different from other communities. Remember going into the pandemic, there was a quote that we wrote in our office area. It's less about the pandemic, but more about how our community and department comes out of it. And you can see that we achieved accreditation 180 out of 10,000 departments nationally. And we also received the gold medal award as the best in nation. So you can see that aspirational management in our department was part of this. But on the next slide, the golf course had really a combination punch in that it had the pandemic to deal with, and then also the construction that was involved to mitigate the private development. All of our Parks and Recreation accomplishments, the golf course raising $450,000 in revenue during this same time and playing during a construction project was truly a Parks and Recreation miracle. So I hope you see that the golf course tried really hard to close the gap as much as it could during this situation. That was about 50% of its normal operations. The council and administration at the time realized that there would be impacts from the medical school construction and the mitigation of that. And they realized that we would be having this discussion at this time. So Brett Watson, our golf professional manager, is going to give you some of the things that are going on at the golf course, since it's a rare opportunity that we present on the golf course and how operation goes to the municipal council. He'll be talking about the environmental sustainability that we experience there, which we water our course without any culinary use. Also, we're talking about how we diversified and increased use at this, how it, as part of the triple play, is a big community impact and a lot more people utilizing the course. And I hope I'm not stealing all this thunder. And program and protect open space, which I think the best way to protect open space is to activate it and give it a purpose. And I think this is a great example of that. So I'll turn it over to Brett at this time.
Thank you. What Scott said. John? Okay. If we go to the, do I have control of that? Okay, perfect. So as Scott said, one of the things that we're most excited about with the new golf course is that it is 100% self-sustaining, not only revenue wise, but from a culinary water standpoint. We use no culinary water on the golf course at all, including all of the grounds out front. That's a change we made in the last couple of months. Our goal going forward is to go to electric carts, and then after that, go to all electric everything. So mowers included in that. In the past year, we saw over 100,000 rounds of golf. To give an idea of that, East Bay was the busiest golf course in Utah County prior to, at about 60,000 rounds. So just over 100,000 rounds were played in the last, calendar year. One of the things, Councilman Shipley, that you brought up last time was how are we diversifying the use? So as we go towards our 100th anniversary this next year in 2023, one of the things that we've looked at is certainly we got really good at golf over the past 100 years, but what can we do to expand that and bring the golf course more to the community? And in the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, we've certainly tapped into that, but not as much as we have our, plans for the future. So first is the triple play, which is associated with the rec center. So any rec center member gets half off on range balls, half off on the pasture, which is our par 3 course, which is lighted at night. And then coming next spring, we'll have what's called the horseshoe, which is a really big putting green that looks like a horseshoe. And it's like miniature golf only on real grass. And that's free for rec center members. It's kind of an a la carte thing, free for any paying golfer. So it allows people to get to the golf course, kind of bridge that gap that maybe it's a little difficult to get in the doors. And then you can go out and putt around for free. You can bring your families. That's just one thing associated with golf. We've done our cross country races with BYU. That has been a huge impact where we bring the high schools in. We've hosted the NCAA nationals. Really excited to continue that. In the past, we've done the movies in the park. We kind of want to expand on that as well, host a few more movies. We actually had a concert scheduled during the Provo Open. And of course, it was the one day it rained all of September. And so unfortunately, we had to cancel that. New events that we're looking at, it's kind of a new thing that you're seeing in the golf world, and a trend is so many times you hear of a tournament or an event that's competitive related, right? It's the Provo Open or it's something we see on TV. One thing that we're really wanting to explore is an event that the council could come down and play in and not feel like you're pressured to be the best golfer on the course and all of those types of things. So Chairman Handley is captain, and you can select the team when we get there, but we'll get going from there. So we're excited about that. And then lastly, since I was here last time, we met with Callaway. Callaway owned their golf company. Callaway owns Topgolf. And part of Topgolf's appeal is it's what's called Shot Tracer, where you can see your golf ball and it goes in the air and you can see where it went and the spin rate and all those types of things. So Topgolf and their Top Tracer program has a program that we can put on our driving range at a very minimal cost that will fit into the golf course budget just fine. And so you'll say you're in station 30 and you'll log in with your phone, and then you and your family or your friends or whoever it is can play games, and you can hit at targets and stuff like that. And it shows up on your phone, does a point system, shows you who wins, something like that. So just one more thing that we're trying to do to make golf a little bit more accessible to everyone. So certainly a ton of big plans coming up. And that's the cool part. I think if you skip to the next slide, you can see our revenues. You can see that one little dip we had. And unfortunately, golf was booming during COVID and we were under construction. But obviously, with increased revenues come increased expenses. And I think as John gets up here and speaks to the transfer, I think what's most important is this gets the golf course, at least so I've been at the golf course for 22 years. And this is the most supported I've felt by a council and an administration. And this is also certainly the most, baseline that we felt where we can just continue to grow and continue to provide for the citizens of Provo and the state of Utah truly in golf. So thank you so much for having me. And John, you're up.
Okay, we can go to the next slide. So what this about tonight is that, as has been mentioned, is the 2020 operating results, which was really impacted by the construction. And during 2021, the auditors actually came in and did a review and determined that there was $235,000 that was needed to be transferred to the golf course, and the council reviewed that and they approved it. One of the things that complicated a little bit though was that there was also the construction going on, and we had received some contributions for the construction that were included that made it look like we had more fund balance than we thought we did. So we went back and did a review earlier this year. We also wanted to wait until the construction was complete and we made sure that we knew exactly where we're at. And it was determined that we need an additional $245,000, which covers the $502,000 operating loss in 2020. I would also mention that it was self-sustaining in 2022, and going forward, we feel optimistic and confident that the golf course will likely be sustainable in the future. So we're just trying to get them whole from 2020. In the previous work session, there was a recommendation that the ARPA committee kind of review the earlier recommendation administration had made. We recommended that an option that the council could consider would be to go into the legacy fund and use some unappropriated funds there to cover this $245,000. Well, as the ARPA committee reviewed it, they came back with a recommendation to do a transfer from the general fund. I just want to mention that administration is supportive of this recommendation. We see this as a one-time fix due to the issue back in 2020, and we feel like, and we're optimistic and feel that it's likely that the golf course will be sustainable in the future. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open this item up to any comment from the public. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Is there any discussion of this item? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. I'll begin the vote and I will vote yes. Counselor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Shipley,
Yes.
Counselor McKay,
Yes.
and Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much. We'll move on then to item number 5. And I just want to make it clear that my vote on that was totally independent of being promised a captainship of whatever golf. Somewhere my grandfather was smiling as he was the one who taught me to golf. Anyway. All right, number 5, a resolution appropriating $5,500,000 in the general fund for a regional sports park and a transfer of those monies from the general fund to the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Project Fund. Kelsey Zarbuck, Budget Officer, or somebody else who's going to present. Scott Henderson, Parks and Rec.
Kelsey would do a great job. I know that. I'm utilizing regional sports park by the numbers sheet that was provided to the council. And what I think it does, it tells a great story of what I think is going to be a generational project for Provo. And we start with where everything starts with a park is land acquisition. So we were able to work with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and show that what we were going to utilize for this park. And it was a complicated process, and it required a new mayor, Mayor Kafusi, to come up to Salt Lake with a congressman, meeting with the presiding bishopric to really get them excited about this concept in Provo. And it also came as part of a land and water conservation fund mitigation as we were selling some land to the Provo School District, which was protected by land and water conservation, and therefore had to have a mitigation site. So we were able to, I like to think, Provo Parks and Recreation overachieves, but we were able to take a 10-acre park and we were able to generate a 100-acre open space mitigation site as part of that. So the net increase of open space in our community has been tremendous. And still, that former park owned by the school district looks very similar to what it did as a park, which was part of the school district's promise to those citizens there. Current land value, so our purchase on that was about 3.5 million. Based on current comparisons, the value of that 100 acres now is somewhere between 20 million and 50 million. So a great investment for Provo and a great mitigation. It is something that does carry the Land and Water Conservation Fund stamp on it. So the use for recreation and open space is a requirement as part of that area. So as we look at the project, which is a great story unto itself, is that this 100-acre site had to be lifted out of the floodplain, between 6 and 10 feet. And we worked with the federal government on the Provo River Delta Restoration Project, which provided a lot of the fill. Also, local projects and material have all partnered with us to bring their fill to that site, and even internal Provo City projects. The retail cost of filling that site like we have is approximately $18 million. We have done that for about 22% of that cost. So in-house, we have been able to work with cooperation throughout our community and community support that has literally lifted this project into reality. Let's talk about how Provo and Provo Parks and Recreation is going to run this project. We will be acting as our own general contractor, working with subcontractors, and we will do direct procurement with those subcontractors. We will work the project and completion north to south to where we will move out of the project to Lakeview Parkway, and that will allow Public Works for their timing for infrastructure and roads timeframe, because most of their elements are going into the south side of the park. Let's talk about the impact that this funding will have on this project. It escalates when we are able to have playing surface going. We will have playing surface in place by spring of 2024, which is compared to an uncertain outcome. If this funding doesn't come, then it is just a as we go element. So we are not sure when we'll be able to finish this. And then that gets us in play of fall of 2024, working towards sodding fields then to escalate this part, because the next thing that I'll talk about is the economic development. And we do want to receive and benefit from that economic development in Provo as quickly as possible and get this project done. It also makes us compliant with Land and Water Conservation Fund requirements and also county grant compliance, which the biggest benefit of that, it opens up, asks for future open space areas to go to those same organizations to get those funds. So it clears a path for other exciting projects in the future, because as you know, Provo Parks and Recreation is never done. Economic impact is estimated by the Utah Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau to be $40,000 annually in local spending. And these are at those industries that were most hit by our most recent pandemic: hospitality, restaurant, and retail sectors. And we think it's something that really turns into a sales pitch for our economic development department to have this type of visitation to our community and this type of interest in our community to come. So this is an interesting impact to where Parks and Recreation can do something that our community needs, but also can impact and make our community and our economic development even more exciting. We plan to operate this facility on a break-even basis. We estimate a $750,000 operations budget, of which we will bring in revenues to cover that. So just like the rec center, just like the Peaks Ice Arena, and as Brett talked about, just like the golf course, we plan on operating this on a self-sustaining basis. So this creates no labor debt, this creates no operational debt, and it creates no capital debt for our area. We plan on elevating and activating current staff that we have with us for them to take on this extra responsibility. All that aside, it really became true this last fall when we currently have 330 teams that are utilizing our existing 11 fields in Provo. But this fall, 300 kids were not able to sign up for youth soccer because we did not have enough soccer fields in our community for them to play. this facility will address that, and we will create the active, healthy kids that we want to in our communities. So thank you very much for your consideration on this. We have always felt the administration and council support as part of this project, and it's something that many council members have been with us since the ground roots, or the grassroots and the ground floor of this project. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Counselor Shipley. You want
Sorry,
to
just
ask a question?
Yeah, quick question if I could. So more specifically to the 5.5, can you address the total expense from this point to completion and how that gets funded and where the 5.5 fits in? So we've got county money, we've got other things at play, but can you help us understand those numbers a little better?
You bet. So the 5.5 really comes in as the last block in building the funding set. So we have utilized the county grant, which we had 2.5 million from the county grant, $1 million from the RAP tax. We have designated 3 of our larger projects and their impact fee funding towards this project. The $5.5 million then comes in and adds into that approximately 25 million. That is the final price tag for the facility.
Any other questions for Mr. Henderson? Okay, thank you. We'll open this item up for public comment from anybody who would like to address this item. Okay, seeing none, except for 2 thumbs up, we'll bring this back to the council for any discussion. Mr. Shipley?
So how do I address this? So I'm glad we're voting on this. I'm glad we're discussing this. I mentioned 2 weeks ago when we said that we'd bring both these back that I was a little bit uncomfortable at that point. It's not something that we as a committee have discussed since, and that's okay. I'm okay with us getting us to this point. Something that's been bouncing around in my head ever since 2 weeks ago, though, is the potential for us yeah, I think I will propose an amendment to this to fund it at a $5 million level. And just as a heads up, to do the same with the next item as well, to reduce it by $500,000 so that we keep $1 million back in ARPA. And let me just give you a few thoughts on that, and then we can continue to discuss it. But that I would move to amend this one, and then I'll move to amend the next one. Can I give my thoughts on it, and then we can ask for a second and discuss?
Sure.
So the idea would be, I think both of these projects, in my understanding, are going to require multiple phases, more money, right, from different places. Neither of them require all the money, I think, right up front immediately. Both of them might require the additional $500,000, and both of them could use the additional $500,000 for sure. But I guess my thought is that it gives us a little bit more time as a council to consult, to solicit ideas, to continue to consider ideas, and then to come back in a few months, and if we'd like to, at our discretion, to still appropriate that additional $500,000 to each one of these projects. But it takes the finality out of tonight, which is important to me. I think there might be a few additional suggestions that we've looked at and contemplated that could still, have merit and still be worth considering. So I don't think that amending this takes away the project, obviously, in either case, but it allows us a little bit more time to marinate with having some resources to do something with if we so chose. And I think it also still allows us the opportunity to come back and fully fund it if we'd like to.
So that is a motion. Excuse me.
A motion to amend the appropriation to $5 million.
Second.
And technically that, Brian, that's a substitute motion, correct?
No, it's a motion to amend.
A motion to amend. Okay, so that's been seconded by Counselor Ellsworth. Is there any discussion of the motion? Mr. Fillmore.
I always have a lot of respect for Mr. Shipley's opinions, particularly in financial matters. But in this regard, I don't think it makes sense. I think we have to acknowledge that Parks and Recreation has done a phenomenal job financing this development. I mean, they've pulled resources from all kinds of different directions. They've saved the city millions of dollars in some of the things they've arranged. they're on a fairly tight schedule to get this thing finished and perfected so it can start generating revenue for us in a year and a half. And I think that's one of the great positives about this appropriation, the whole project, is that it's not a sunk cost. This is going to generate revenue for the city. What is it, $40 million a year, the annual impact on the economy? I think the sooner we finish that, the better. And for all they've done to this point, and it's a great project, and they've been so frugal in what they've done. I don't want them to feel like they're going to come up short or have to go begging for more money. I think they need the assurance that they can finish this thing on time and on budget. And I would oppose the motion on that basis. Although I understand the fiscal prudence involved in your suggestion, I think this is the non-appropriate project to apply that logic to.
Other discussion of this substitute motion? Mr. Hoban. Yes.
Further discussion, was there a second?
Yes, Shannon Ellsworth. Okay.
I guess I'm just curious if Scott would have any thoughts as far as an opinion on that we only appropriate 5 million and then hold some back, or if there's any thoughts on that, if you want to comment or no. Putting you on the spot, so you could say no if you want.
You're okay. Scenario-based project management is a strength. So what it does is every project, things go in a certain thing. So as you're letting out contracts and you're sequencing and you're doing that, and having the funding in place is very important, and it can become almost critical at a certain time on whether or not it moves forward. So from our standpoint, having a clear picture of the funding sure makes project management a much easier way to go out and get bids from subcontractors right into those, set the scope for what you're asking for. So the more you can put into a certain picture in project funding sure helps in project management.
Okay, thank you. I
Other
don't know. That
discussion?
sounds pretty convincing. That was pretty convincing to me. I don't know if Councilor Shipley would want to respond to that or no.
Yeah. Mr. Borgett. I'll defer to Mr. Borgett and then I'll respond if that's okay.
Okay.
The one concern that I have is that with the ARPA funds, they have to be encumbered by 2024 and spent by 2026. That may seem like a long ways away, but time is flying. I mean, I can't believe how much time has already passed since the ARPA funds were announced and we've been starting to review it. And I also feel like the sooner that the Parks and Rec team and also with City Hall, the sooner that we can get contractors lined up and get things rolling, the more likely that we're going to be able to spend that money within the time requirements too. So I think it's another factor to consider.
Thank you.
So just, I guess in response and a little bit more about my thought process. My thought process is to hold back the $500,000 with the idea that in the next 2 to 3 months, it either gets released to the same project or there's something else that we discuss. I think it gives two different things. It allows two different things to happen. One is I don't believe, and again, we're putting Scott on the spot, but with this conversation, it wasn't something that I've discussed with anybody. I don't think it holds anything back to hold back $500,000. I think they can proceed with projects as fast as they'd like to in the very near term. The other thing that I would say is I think it allows us to continue to vet specifics of both of these projects. And let me just maybe say that I think both of these projects, again, are significant projects that take more than what we're discussing. There's a lot of different moving parts on both of them. And I guess that was my anxiety 2 weeks ago, is that I think both of them have enough moving parts that I would, even if it's in part, I would rather defer some of this. But with the idea that, there's a clear expectation that we come back and address whether or not we add that additional funding or not within the next 2 or 3 months. So I don't think we're taking it off the table completely. I just think it allows us to vet it, continue to vet it. And I guess I would, to Bill's point, I completely understand what he's saying. I guess I compare it to saying, like, look, if we
had a car or a home, a large purchase that we as a household wanted to make, any of us individually, sometimes pulling that back or changing the plan for a time, isn't going to be the difference of whether or not we get that or not. Both of these projects will move independent of whether or not we hold some back or not. I think that's just my personal opinion. I think they'll both move forward. But it might make us better decision makers if we do that. And I guess that's my thought.
I'll make a comment, I guess. Oh, actually, Catrice has got her hand up. I'll let her go first. Go ahead, Councilor McKay.
I feel like we've been discussing this or having, the ARPA funds in our control for a long time and haven't moved yet. And I'm with Bill on the thinking that Parks and Rec has gone above and beyond, being resourceful and creative with their solutions for the park. And I'm very anxious for it to be in play and to have the economic development that I believe it'll bring and the money that it'll bring into the city.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just add, I think I agree with the original motion. I think Parks and Rec has made a very clear case as to why 5.5 is the necessary amount. And I remember asking about this 2 weeks ago, whether actually I've asked it, I think more than once, if, a portion of the funds would be helpful. And I think Parks and Rec has made their case, and they've got a wonderful track record that they need that 5.5 in totality. And they've made a case that they spend their money about as well as we could ever hope on projects that benefit the city. So I think for me, it's just a matter of whether or not the 5.5 is the right amount. If they need it, and they do. I will say, I want to clarify, your substitute motion was, at least at this point, you signaled that you were going to make another one, right? But this is just on this particular item. So on this particular item, I don't see any reason to hold back on the 5.5. So I'm ready to approve that. And I would not be voting in favor of the substitute motion. There are other comments about the substitute motion? Councilor Whipple?
So I'm now torn because of Councilor Shipley's motion. I have been convinced by Scott Henderson that this is a really good project, in part because of his past track record with the other big visionary projects that he's brought to our city that have been phenomenal, that took a lot of courage and foresight to get us. We're at the rec center the other day, like, this is the most wonderful place to lift weights. It's open, it's airy, it's fantastic. It doesn't have a sauna, but it's not completely perfect. And I have great confidence in him and his department to build wonderful facilities for our city that are used and that are wonderful. And I really appreciate that. And I've asked before, if the money doesn't come from here, then where does it come from and when does it come? And one thing that's really persuasive at this point is we have matching funds that need to be spent, or they will be lost if we don't get the match and everything. And these ARPA funds coincidentally need to be spent in a period of time. And I've been convinced that if we do put the money in this, then the Parks Department will put their resources and their funds into funding other things through our city, smaller projects that maybe aren't as big and bold and sexy, but are absolutely necessary for members of our community. And so much as I would like to cut out a portion of this right now to hold on to say, but what about this little thing that I care about too, which I think is really valid, and that we should be looking at the little things as well as the big things. I think I'm convinced that
the right thing to do right now is to go ahead and do the full amount for him. But you tore me, Dave.
Okay, any other comment? Mr. Ellsworth?
Yeah, I appreciate the thoughtful and incremental approach of Mr. Shipley, and I don't think it represents in any way, it's certainly not my sentiment to undermine a very competent department director. So I hope no one sees funding allocations as a vote of confidence or a lack of confidence in a department director. But I do think we need to factor in not just wants, but also needs. And that's not a conversation that we've had very much with this pot of ARPA funds. Is what are our needs, not just our wants. So I think we owe the process and these unique funds and the citizens a more thoughtful, thorough process.
All right, if there's no further discussion on the substitute motion, I'll call for a vote on the substitute motion to withhold $500,000 from the total amount for a future deliberation. I'll begin with Counselor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore.
No.
Counselor Whipple.
No.
Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
Counselor McKay.
No.
Counselor Hoban.
No.
And I, George Hanley, will vote no. So that is 2 in favor, Counselor Ellsworth and Counselor Shipley in favor, the rest opposed. So that is defeated, and we'll go back to the original motion, which is appropriating 5.5 in the general fund. Is there any discussion of that item before I call for a vote? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. I'll begin with Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
Counselor McKay.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
I, George Hanley, will vote yes. Counselor Ellsworth.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you so much to all of you in Parks and Rec for your work, and John. Okay, we'll turn to item number 6 on the agenda, which is a resolution appropriating $3 million in the general fund for demolition, abatement, or redevelopment incentives for the old city center site, and a transfer of those monies from the general fund to the Legacy Capital Improvement Project Fund. And it looks like Justin Harrison is presenting this item.
Good evening, council. Sorry, I am not Kelsey. You're stuck with me. As you'll recall, 2 weeks ago at your work meeting, we had a discussion regarding ARPA funds. This was the second point where the council had directed staff to bring back this resolution appropriating $3 million in those discretionary ARPA funds for the demolition, abatement, or redevelopment incentives for the old city center block. We had a lengthy discussion from CAO Wayne Parker. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'm sure Wayne would be happy to answer any as well, or walk you through that process that the administration has gone through along with that initial RFP for the city center block. Any questions?
Any questions for person? Go ahead, Councilor Whipple.
I don't know if my question's for you so much as it may be for Mr. Parker, but do we have any updates on negotiations regarding this project?
No, there's nothing since 2 weeks ago when we talked again. The RFQ for redevelopment is finished. We've been waiting to know how the appropriation was going to go before we put that out. We have, again, we still have a preliminary estimate on asbestos abatement, ready to put out the request for proposals to actually solidify those costs. So again, not much has changed other than work's continued.
And can you remind me of what that preliminary estimate for the asbestos was?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Henderson, I think my recollection was like 1.8 million for the asbestos abatement on this building. Am my memory correct on that one?
A preliminary assessment of the building, so not a formal bid or quote, but I think it was right at that 1.8 million to 2 million.
And again, that's been several months ago. And I think all of us recognize what's been happening with construction cost escalation. And every day that goes by, this $3 million gets us less and less done. So we're anxious to have an answer. And again, I just remind the council, when we first talked about this, the allocation of the ARP money that was discretionary, we started that discussion in January of this year. You came back to us in April and asked for a administration recommendation. We gave that to you in April, and we're just anxious to get to the end of the process.
I have a quick follow-up.
Yes, go ahead.
So that estimate for the asbestos abatement, is that the entire demolition, including the asbestos
No.
abatement, or just the asbestos part of the demolition?
Asbestos only.
So the full cost of demolition is more than that.
Yes, that is true.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Is there any public comment on this item? I'll open for public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for further discussion. Further discussion of this item. Counselor Shipley.
Yeah, I just move that we make a amendment to the motion to be $500,000 less at 2.5. Again, same idea, which is that I'm supportive of moving this along. I think taking a few months on and holding some back doesn't harm the timing of this in any material way. If we can get started, on some of this, that's great. One of the things that continues to happen with this particular project is we've got layers, right? We've got the asbestos, we've got the demolition, we've got parking that's needed, we've got different layers that we've talked through that are needed that go way beyond the funding that we can actually even provide. And so I'm anxious to get a step or two down the road and go back out to developers, to get another round of negotiation. And if then we come back and say, look, throwing another $500,000 at this would help us to further that negotiation, then I think that's relevant to consider. Also gives us time and resource to continue to talk about other options as well.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, on that, that's an amendment to the motion, discussion of the suggested amendment. Mr. Fillmore.
I would just ask Mr. Parker or the mayor to respond to this proposal. How would holding back 500,000 harm you going forward on this project?
Well, my sense is, again, we have the $500,000, I think, will be important. Not so much, and again, I don't know, when we put out the bids for asbestos, I may be surprised, but I don't think it'll hurt in the asbestos abatement, but we will continue to have a building, even after asbestos abatement, that is not habitable, that, we're going to fence off, and it will sit there until we have a solution. And going out to the development community for an RFP without knowing what funding we have other than the money for the asbestos abatement it's going to put a real bind in the process of selecting a developer. If we don't know what's on the table to move forward on, then I'm not sure what kind of development we're going to get, and we may just end up with a parking lot. That would be unfortunate, but that may be all we're able to do. So again, I just our frustration in this process has been that it's just taken us 11 months to get to a solution, and 6 months since we last made a proposal about this. We've had public hearings where we've considered many other alternatives. You've vetted those, and so again, our frustration is high. Obviously, whatever you do, whatever you come up with tonight, we will live with, and we'll figure out how to make the best of it, but it would certainly not be our first choice.
Acknowledging the fact that costs continue to go up, how do you break out that 3 million now? I mean, what is your best guesstimate?
Well, I don't really have a good idea until we get a firm bid on the asbestos abatement. We did do a survey. We had a company go in and walk through the building, climb in the rafters, go into the basement, look at pipe wrap, look at every ceiling tile.
to determine where the asbestos was. So I think we have a pretty good sense of scale. What we don't have is a good unit cost now. I mean, we're just several months down the road from the last time we tested that.
The reason I asked that, Mr. Parker, is because I recall from our prior discussions that you were potentially reserving a certain buffer amount at 3 million that could be applied to parking lot or to rather parking facility or incentives for developer. So is that just kind of amorphous at this point?
Yeah, it is. So let me just kind of hark back to our process. And as you know, we went through a process where we identified a master developer. When we got the level of city subsidy required, it was clear that our visions didn't align. The city subsidy request was actually more than we spent on this building, which was clearly not in the realm of possibility. And so again, we had forecasted initially that the developer would be responsible for asbestos removal, demolition of the building, and providing 235 parking stalls to meet the needs of City Hall. That clearly didn't pan out. In fact, it was way beyond what we had expected at all. And so again, when we made the initial request for the $3 million, it really was to go into the equation for the redevelopment. What we've concluded now is we don't have time to wait to begin the asbestos removal and the demolition of the building. It's becoming increasingly a significant liability for us. And so we're anxious to move post haste on those things. And again, I hate to shortchange us in the process of getting this land essentially cleared and either ready for a temporary parking solution or a longer term redevelopment solution. So that's the best I can tell you, Counselor.
Thank you. I certainly concur that time is of the essence. Yeah.
Counselor Hoban and then Counselor Whipple.
So Counselor Shipley, is it kind of just a principle of like, well, we don't have a firm bid on these things, and so why are we writing a blank check right now? Let's get some more firm cost estimates or have a better idea what the plan is, or is that kind of the principle here that you're approaching this from, or something more practical that I'm not understanding?
So for this particular project, it has to do with, there were, again, layers to this process that were going to cost way beyond 3 million, right? If we do parking, it's going to cost a lot more than that. If we do even full demolition and asbestos, it might be way more than what we're allocating here. So my thought process is do round one, which is the asbestos removal, go out to the developers again and see what the appetite is to take on a project once that's completed. And then if there is an appetite and we need to throw $500,000 at something, I guess my thought at this point is $500,000 doesn't get us anywhere on round 2 or round 3. It just is kind of going into a slush of potential money to put towards one of those two, segments. So my thought is get segment 1 done, get it done right away, go out to the developers, see if it changes the discussion at all. And if it doesn't, let's talk again.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Whipple.
Yes. So honestly, I would have fewer qualms about allocating this money if we were just going to demo it ourselves, right? If we were going to go through, do the asbestos abatement, demolition, put in a temporary parking spot, and then see what the market looks like for developers and things like that. In fact, not only would I be happy to allocate this 3 million, I'd be happy to allocate more money from the general fund to get that done, to get the hazard, the liability, the nuisance out of the way. Where I have reservations is instead of doing this, it looks like what we're doing is putting more money into a pot for an incentive for the developers. And I understand why that's necessary, because our first plan where we didn't do that didn't work. But the reason I asked for the numbers on the abatement and everything is because it feels too pat that the amount that you're asking for just happens to be the amount that we have left in ARPA, right? That you're just going to ask for all of the rest of the pot and say we need it, instead of just because it's there instead of looking at other options. I don't think that's what you're doing, but that's the feeling. And I wanted to address that for the public and give you an opportunity to address that and justify it with the numbers and everything. So it doesn't look like you're saying there's this money, give it to this big project that we want to do. And so that's where my reservation is. And we've had so many requests from people in the city. We have these ARPA funds. Can we put it in our neighborhood? Can we do this and this and this? And I feel a great responsibility to them to look at it carefully and not just put it in the clear big hungry thing that needs it. Does that make sense? And so while I definitely want that asbestos gone and I want the building down as quickly as possible, I have a few little hesitations, which is why I'm supporting Dave's alternate motion here.
Councilor McKay.
I guess I'm looking for clarity because like Rachel, I understood that we were using the money to bring the building down ourselves and turn it into a parking lot while we work on finding the best, redevelopment deal that we can do, but that we were going to take care of that stuff ahead of time to get rid of that liability.
Keith Morey or Mayor? Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me? Okay.
Sure.
Let me just explain how I look at this from my perspective. There's a bunch of different moving parts for me. One of them is we're trying to get a fire station built. So there's equipment mobilization that has to happen to take that down. And although that building to some extent can be separated, you're going to have to mobilize the same equipment twice if you don't do it all at once. And that's an added cost. When we tried to incorporate the abatement and the demolition of that building into the original RFP that we did, I think we all saw the results of that in a response that was overblown to the point where we couldn't really justify it. So it's apparent to us that we need to do something because we're going to be asked to abate it and demolish it probably, or to reimburse the cost for someone else to do it one way or the other. It's a huge liability to us. I think the police department will tell you that it's a continuing safety hazard and people are continuing to break into it. The asbestos needs to be removed. We did a very quick analysis, or had a consultant do an analysis just to give us a high level estimate of what the cost should be. We know it's going to be, close to the money that we're asking you for. We're hoping that we can get as much done as we possibly can with that. From my perspective, honestly, the reality is it may not be enough. It may take some of our own public works help and assistance to do that. One of the concerns we have is that we don't have within the city some of the heavy equipment that it's probably going to take. So if we don't have it, that means we're going to have it brought in from someone else, and that's an added cost. So there's just a lot of moving parts, and the quicker we get moving on it, the more we can capitalize on rising costs and try to get as much done as we possibly can, and hopefully get the majority of it done with that $3 million without having to come back and ask you for more. But the longer this goes on, the potential that the $500,000 that you're saving is going to be what we ask for in addition to another whatever, because those costs just continue to go up and up and up. So I don't think Wayne or the mayor are exaggerating when they're telling that time is of the essence. And the more work we do to clear this up and create a clean slate, I think the better opportunity that we have to partner with future developers to reclaim that site and turn it into something wonderful.
Yes, that is what I was thinking. So I think you just confirmed my thought that the intention is to get the building leveled and the asbestos and everything to get things cleared as soon as possible.
Mayor?
Yeah, so even this morning in my director's meeting, we discussed the safety of our employees. When this asbestos starts, they will fence it off, including old fire station 1, and then they'll wrap it in plastic, right? Each one of our tiles has to be wrapped in saran wraps individually. It's such a huge job and such a mess. And so it's exactly what Keith said, to rent equipment or bring in heavy equipment, to have to turn around and do it again, the costs will go through the roof. And my employees in the meantime are not going to be able to park. They're going to have, because the staging area as well. So when you rebuild, as you all know, as you've watched it all, not only do we have to fence off the part we're tearing down, but now we got to stage and bring in big equipment and industrial supplies. And so the employees are going to be walking, because right now they're parking under the building. Say goodbye to that. That whole parking lot is going to be gone. They're going to be walking to the new skin parking lot, which they've been great partners to allow me to have the employees park there. But we're in the middle of winter. It's dark. I've had to already talk to the chief about having a police officer there to make sure the employees are back and forth safely from that area. At the state liquor store, backs right up to it, and it tends to be a little bit of an issue with that. And then that 7-Eleven right there, it just folds into this huge web of problems. And the quicker, and I'm with Keith, I think we're going to need more than 3 million the way it's looking, and to get everything dropped and down. Our whole end goal was to get it dropped and down, scraped, talk to Public Works about doing some rough road base, or I can't remember what was the term they used. I'm just using the terms I know, and then stripe it and utilize it as parking for the employees. At that point, the RFP, people will come in and they'll be able to have a vision of what they could do on that piece of land. Right now, it's not very visionary. And it's going to get worse because we're going to fence it off and wrap it completely in saran wrap. It's just going to be an eyesore. So the quicker we can drop that development services and the old fire station, I mean, literally, we keep talking about just the city hall piece, but it's not. There's a lot more that's got to drop and be fenced off. And the safety and the employees matters to me. The quicker we can get it flat and parked for the employees until we get a redevelopment project that we all feel comfortable with, that will park them closer and safer. I'm just all about moving along as fast as we can. And every day with inflation, that $3 million a year ago was worth a lot more than it is now. With the construction costs going up like they are, the supply chain issues, everything's going to be more expensive. The dollar is losing value. And so it's just frustrating for the administrative side. And as I'm watching my directors to have to even have what's going to magically happen in 3 months if we come back and ask for $500,000 more, but really now we need $2 million. We just need to get moving on this. Because we've been at a standstill waiting for a decision. So we were really hoping we would be able to come to a conclusion on this tonight. And like I said, think about all those moving pieces, because all of this 3 million impacts all of that, including Fire Station 1 and parking and safety and scraping. And it's just almost like a domino effect. Once we get the money and it lands, it's just going to go, 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 go. And that's exactly what we want to happen.
Further comment, discussion, Counselor, I'm sorry, did you want to respond quickly? Counselor Ezra hasn't spoken yet though, so.
I appreciate that. I do. Maybe what my hangup is that the implied motion is that it's for demolition, abatement, or redevelopment incentives. And if it's just for the demolition and abatement, then I'm much more comfortable with that, because I want that thing down. And I understand that you have that language is probably in there for additional flexibility. But since we got burnt on that last developer thing, I don't want to have this money tied up for this project to go through that whole process again to find out that it will not work, which is why I would rather that we just go ahead with shredding the building and containing all the dust and getting rid of it, instead of keeping it as a possible incentive. So I think I feel the same time pressure and everything. I just don't want to have that same holdup where we have this money as an incentive. We go to the developer, they're going to demolish and do everything, and then it comes back and it doesn't work again. I just want the building down.
My suggestion would be that you amend the item that's on the agenda so that you remove the incentive word and you leave redevelopment of the site, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about demolition, we're talking about abatement, and we're talking about redeveloping the site, whether that's cleaning the property or putting it back, a parking lot there in the interim, something like that. Either take redevelopment and incentives out or just take incentives out.
And does that hurt the administration's flexibility or what they need to accomplish?
No, I think in the sequencing, that would probably work for us. We'd be back to talk to you about the next phase when it's ready.
Councilor Ellsworth, did you want to make?
Yeah, I think if you're just part of the general public and some of this is hard to track, it seems like when the bond was passed or proposed or discussed in public meetings and certainly in the public forums around the city, that people kind of assumed there was a good plan for this, for that parcel, for that building, and that it would be appropriately torn down or redeveloped. And I don't know that there was a path communicated to the public on what that was going to be and how much it was going to cost. And today, I don't know that there is a path that can be clearly articulated on what it's going to be and how much it's going to cost. And so that gives me pause. I feel like that wasn't either a comprehensive process or maybe it was just a detail that was forgot somehow. But to the public, I think it certainly looks as though the folks involved just maybe overlooked that or didn't bring that to light. And even today, again, it doesn't feel like there's a clear path articulated and we don't know how much it's going to cost. And that's a difficult situation for us to address because this can't be the last $3 million we're going to spend on that site. It's just the first, I think, of many requests. So that's hard. I think that puts us in a really poor position in terms of planning and transparency and hard to be proactive with developers when we're reacting year after year, month after month. In terms of the urgency of the matter, and even the last funding request we got for the soccer complex, I guess if it's absolutely that urgent, then we should be pulling funds from other pots within the city. There's close to $1 million that were allocated 2 years ago for incentives on the west side. And if this is going to economic development, this has some kind of economic development value, which is why it says redevelopment incentives. And the last project, the soccer complex, has economic development value. Why are we not pulling that $1 million into something that's considered so critical? So there is some inconsistencies and there's not a clear path articulated, and that's hard for me.
Can I make a comment? Yeah. I'm not in favor of pulling any of the money. I want to vote on the 3 million. I mean, I don't know if I have to elaborate on it. I don't want to waste any more time here, but I'll just say quickly, I feel like the administration already has explained to us what their challenges were with the redevelopment of that site. And we had an unexpected and very disappointing result after the initial round. And I don't think anybody is at fault for that. I think that was just a very unfortunate thing. I was extremely hopeful about what was possible there, and it didn't work out. I don't feel like we have made a case for a specific use of that $500,000. I know we've asked for other things. We've explored other possibilities, but there's nothing that's pressing quite as much. And most of the things that I know that we are concerned about and have expressed our interest in, the administration and the department directors have helped us address some of those, and at least to my satisfaction. I know that we've got other needs in the city, and like we said earlier, spending this money here means maybe we're freeing up some money that we can spend elsewhere. But this money is, as I see it, and it's actually Councilor Shipley who helped me to see this, is that we're avoiding debt by spending this money, and I think this is the right way to spend it. So I'm going to vote for the 3 million.
Just for my place on this, and maybe to respond for myself on some of the different things that are said. The way that I interpreted this project was there were different things that we wanted to accomplish to then test the development market for the Center Street, the project. And when it was initially proposed, we were going out to kind of test the water, and there wasn't a development to be had unless we put some money towards something, and started this process. And so I guess my thought process is if the asbestos, which in my notes was somewhere around, $1.5 million to 2 million when we originally, were talking about this, my thought process was get that done and then let's do another round with developers before we jump to that next step. Why do we feel like we have to, it's an all or nothing situation before we go back and test the water with developers? And so I think the flexibility on the original ordinance was meant to do that, was meant to say, look, give us all 3 million and we'll do whatever we possibly can, go as far as we can with the different rounds of, reconstruction and redevelopment on the property, but also at the same time, go out and make sure that we're in the development mark, that we're talking to developers all along the way. So I guess my thought process is like, why jump steps? I mean, I don't think the $500,000 is going to keep the building from coming down. If we have to do that to get developers at our door, then we have to do that to get developers at our door. And I want the building down and I want developers talking to us just as much as anybody here. But I think the first step is asbestos, and how it was communicated to us all along was like, we need to get through that step. And then my interpretation was we go out and weigh whether or not developers are willing to consider a project based on that part of the project being done. I don't think we have enough money to tear the whole building down. I don't think we have enough money to put parking on the site. We can do a lot of things internally to mitigate those costs, obviously, and I expect that we will. But the idea that the 3 million is going to get us all three of those phases, I think is, it's wishful thinking. I think we have enough to do phase one. So let's do phase one and go talk to developers again. And if we need to go to phase two, which is, hurry and tear down the building so that we're ready for a developer to actually look at this and take us seriously, then let's do that next. I think what we're asked for in the ordinance and what we've been asked for to date is just give us as much as you're willing to give us so that we can try to go down this road as fast as we possibly can. And while I agree, I would be asking for the same thing from an administration's perspective, from a council perspective, I would rather us take it in a phased approach and get through step one. And then even if that's a month from now, and we've actually got a solid bid on asbestos, I'd rather look at it at that point and allocate the rest to the next phase of it if we've talked to developers and don't have anybody at the table.
All right, if there's no further discussion of the proposed amendment, yes, Mr. Fillmore.
I was trying to get us to there, but
I feel like I owe the chair an apology somehow.
That's all right, go ahead.
Well, an idea has been floated to do a substitute or amended motion along the lines of supporting the administration's urgency to do the demolition, the asbestos, and some temporary parking arrangement, and to delete the element having to do with developer incentives. What would be the right, Brian, I'm asking you, I guess, what would be the right protocol for doing that? Do we have to vote on the current motion?
Well, maybe, could I maybe just ask a I mean, does it matter if we already know, if we already know how we're going to vote on the substitute motion, maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know if the wording, what I heard from what Councilor Whipple said, and you can clarify, is if that wording was different, would it change your vote? And I didn't hear any indication that it would. So I don't know if it matters, I guess. But Mr. Jones, do you have?
So I guess procedurally, you've got an amended motion on this. I would call, in this case, a substitute motion, because different way of handling. Could take a substitute motion now and vote on it first. Substitute motion would be leave the $3 million, but to amend purposes for which the money is. Whoever wants to make that motion, I think would need that. That could happen procedurally.
Okay.
So that's correct. That's the motion I was going to propose.
Okay.
Should I? At this point? Okay, so the motion I would propose, call it what you will, is that we appropriate the $3 million, where we limit the purposes of the expenditure to asbestos abatement, demolition of the building, temporary parking, and strip out for the time being anything having to do with developer incentives. That's the motion.
Okay. Any second on that? second on it. That dies. We'll go back to the.
Wait, I'll be,
Oh.
what,
Oh, Catrice. Did you want to second that?
I'm good going to the original. So sorry, I was just clarifying.
Sorry, what did you say? You're good with the original motion?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's how I feel as well, but
No, it dies for the lack of a second then.
okay. All right, then I will call. No? What am I doing? What are you reaching for your microphone for, Counselor Whipple? Would you like to make a comment? Go ahead. I'm joking. Go ahead.
But to clarify, I thought I was addressing Councilor Whipple's concern. And that would make it easier for her.
Yes, so Councillor Fillmore is addressing my concern. If we remove language related to incentives, then I would be all right appropriating the full 3M.
Okay, can I ask for clarification? There was talk, Keith had suggested striking, you could strike the word incentives, you could strike redevelopment incentives. Which are you proposing?
It sixes with me, same thing. Redevelopment, development incentives
Just
would be the
drop
right thing to
redevelopment
strike.
incentives?
Okay, so you are seconding?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are striking redevelopment incentives right there.
And what I heard in the motion was to add.
I don't believe that that much would actually go for temporary parking, but sure.
Oh, that's true, but Mr. Shipley convinced me yet again that I want to vote for this. Sorry. Because we're in so deep. I don't see why holding back 500,000 is helping us at this point. So I'm all in. I'm more convinced. So strike and redevelopment incentives, and the motion is to replace that with temporary parking. Okay. All right. Any discussion of the substitute motion? I will call for a vote on the
Can we change the or to an and? Maybe,
Sure.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah. All right. All right. I will now call for a vote on the substitute motion, and I'll begin with Counselor Whipple.
So the substitute motion is the one that Mr. Fillmore has suggested and I
Yes.
have seconded. I will vote yes on this one.
I'm so glad. Counselor Shipley.
No.
Counselor Hoban.
No.
I, George Hanley, will vote yes. Counselor Vice Chair McKay.
Okay, I'm confused what we're voting on. I'm sorry, guys. You guys are all over the place.
We're voting on a substitute motion to replace redevelopment incentives, the phrase redevelopment incentives, with and temporary parking in the motion,
For
in
the-
the resolution,
For the full 3 million.
for the full 3 million.
Okay. And does Keith think this will cover what they need it for?
If that's unclear, it'll get us a whole lot farther than without the 3 million. I think it will let us move more quickly and get started right away and hopefully capitalize on the value of the dollar right now.
Okay, I'll vote yes.
Counselor McKay votes yes. Counselor Ellsworth,
No.
Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
Okay. I think yes, I did vote yes. So I had Counselors Hoban, Shipley, and Ellsworth opposed, and the other 4 in favor. So that passes. So now we will call for a vote on the implied motion that is now in the red wording in front of us. I'll
We do need
begin.
to make a couple more changes and Malia's going to make those now.
Okay.
Also an occurrence in that first paragraph.
Of incentives.
Anything with Dave's motion now? That got wiped out by the substitute? Okay, see, I'm still learning procedure. Thank you.
Tell me when you're ready. I'll wait. Anything else? Oh,
That looks good, Malia.
that look good? Good. Okay, so I'll call for a vote now on the implied motion, now or newly substituted motion with the wording in front of us. I'll begin with Counselor Shipley.
No.
Counselor Hoban.
No.
I, George Hanley, will vote yes. Vice Chair McKay.
Hey, I thought we just voted on this. Why are we voting on it again?
We voted to substitute that language. Now we're voting on the package as it's written.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Counselor Ellsworth,
No.
Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Okay, so that is 4 in favor with Counselors Shipley, Hoban. Our last item on the agenda. It's like Justin Harrison will be our presenter. This is a resolution appropriating $57,635 in the general fund for water conservation.
Good evening, council. Again, I'll take you back 2 weeks ago as we had a lengthy discussion on ARPA appropriations. Just to kind of set the stage, you've now appropriated the full $10 million in discretionary funding. This was the residual $57,635 that were left from the non-discretionary funding. It was approximately $23 million that the city had received. And the direction from council was for staff to bring back a resolution in that amount for water conservation. In the last couple of weeks, staff has reviewed the Treasury guidance to ensure that this is an appropriate use of funds and can ensure you that it is under the Treasury guidance final rule, water and sewer infrastructure, section 5.8. There is guidance that allows for cities to use these non-discretionary funds for water conservation.
All right, any questions for Mr. Harrison?
When we talked about this 2 weeks ago, I believe we talked about this being citizen facing or end user oriented, right? Not using this for public works directives necessarily, but maybe it's for flipping the strip or for education purposes that are aligned with the state's messaging on water conservation. Is that something that we need to be more specific about in the resolution? Or as those funds are drawn down, we'll be aware of those projects?
Yes, so this is appropriating these funds currently sit in the general fund, and I may phone a friend to Ms. Zarbuck to talk about the funding mechanism. But the council still has the full purview to allocate these funds directly where they would like to see those go. So as we didn't have a fully fleshed out plan, there was direction to use these for citizen facing communication, as well as there were also talks of, as the conservation resiliency plan comes to light and comes before the full council, the idea being that these funds may be used for those anything contained in that document. So they are still under the purview of the council and will be appropriated directly at your discretion.
Other questions for Mr. Harrison? Okay, thank you. Any comments from the public on this item? There are no comments from the public. I'll bring it back to the council for any discussion. Seeing the discussion, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I'll begin with Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
I, George Hanley, will vote yes. Vice Chair McKay.
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
That vote is unanimous. If there is no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting by unanimous consent.